I've had plenty of opportunities to do a sideline for NBA, for men, anything. I don't want that. I don't want that.
Ari Chambers is not only a sports journalist, she's also a model, social media producer, and that's not even it. She has so much going on. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. There's so much going on in the world. Where do we start?
Mm-hmm. Right. You know, as a Black woman, we're trained to be like, I'm great. I'm doing great. But are we doing great?
Right. That's the question. I mean, where's your head at right now?
Basic levels of survival. I've been trying to find any type of balance that I can, just to stay above water and find my peace in the midst of all of this turmoil. Not only do we have a global pandemic, but we have a race war going on that is really necessary. And I'm kind of glad that it's happening because reform is needed right now. But it can take a toll. You know, Black people, we have secondhand trauma. So just trying to navigate through that. I hope you're staying above water and all this.
Yeah, it's definitely been hard, but I think, like you said, it's been so necessary. And
Mm-hmm.
It took a global pandemic, everyone being stuck in the house and all this it's just kind of amazing to me that people are saying the veil has been lifted, as if people really didn't know that racism was a thing.
But you know what's
I
funny?
think it's crazy.
The ones, because I remember doing the same thing in 2016, right? The ones who didn't, I don't want to say buy into it because that sounds so trivial, but the ones who weren't understanding of the movement of Black Lives Matter back in 2016 have finally, something clicked. I see a lot more solidarity and allyship this go round. So hopefully this will be the thing that sets it off into a new society that can be, equitable and serving everybody. I know it's going to take a lot to make that happen, but we're making steps in the right direction, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Even seeing NASCAR, Bubba.
Mm-hmm. NASCAR!
I'm a fan.
NASCAR.
I'm a fan. Who would have thought that one day? NASCAR.
Never.
Let's start talking about you.
Okay.
So when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a lawyer, and I still kind of do, right? I saw it in myself. I've always been audacious. I've always been the type to collect evidence again. I was a little conspirator. I always would when I in third grade, it was funny, Green Year Round Elementary School in Raleigh, North Carolina. We had a playground that was K through third grade and then a fourth and fifth grade playground. And I told my mom when I was in either second or third grade, I was like, Mom, I'm suing them because they won't let me on the fourth and fifth grade playground. So I was always into that kind of thing. And I've taken, since quarantine, I've taken a couple of online free law classes, and it's still something of my interest. So when I was little, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a defense attorney. Now it's probably not going to be that. It's probably going to be public policy. But I've always wanted to be a lawyer, have a Juris Doctor.
That's really cool, and taking advantage of your time in quarantine.
But before that, I wanted to be a singer, but I can't even hold a note. Because of the Spice Girls, I wanted to be a singer, but I had to let that go.
But you ended up going into broadcast and all of these things. But before that, you were in fashion. So how did you come into that area?
Well, I tell people a lot that I would be foolish to say that broadcast wasn't in my blood. My dad's a mass comm professor, and my mom was an English major. So it's not like anything that was far from me. I was a new communication and English double major. So it's right there in my lineage. But I stumbled upon fashion. When I was 18, I put on my Facebook status that I wanted a photographer for Christmas. And my friend was like, talk to my boyfriend, Kevin. He's a booker. I got signed in North Carolina, and then they sent me to New York, and I got signed in New York. And it was literally all because I wanted to make a Christmas card for my mom. That's it.
Wow.
But I feel like when you're called to do something, you're going to end up exactly where you need to be. I always loved the runway. In high school, we had modeling troops, and so I would love to perform there. That's way more dance team but I always just love performance, shining in that way. So I just took my talents. I was the right requirements, because back then they had strict requirements, and I fit it, and it just worked.
That's so crazy. That's awesome.
Right. You just put a Facebook status, you never know where it'll take you.
Right. A tweet now, that could go anywhere.
100%.
So when you went to college, what did you study?
So I initially accepted a teaching fellow scholarship at UNC Charlotte.
Mhm.
And I realized really quickly that teaching was not going to be for me. I just had such influential English teachers along the way. You know, they can shape the way you think. And I was like, I want to teach English. I want to make a difference in that way. And so I accepted a teaching fellow scholarship, but that would have required me to stay in North Carolina for an additional 4 years post graduation. And that wasn't going to be conducive to my modeling career. And then plus I did clinicals at an elementary school because we had to do all levels. I wanted to teach high school English, but we had to do all levels. And I was like, I can't, y'all not about to keep climbing me. And no, I don't like that. So I actually dropped out of school and moved to New York and modeled. And then I dropped back in because my mom was like, do you know where you come from? Get it together. So I ended up going to NC State and I cheered there. And that's actually what brought me back. Not what brought me back to New York, because after I graduated from there, I went back to New York, made a pit stop at Oxford. But I went back to New York, and then I was still modeling, but then I started doing entertainment at Madison Square Garden with Knicks, Rangers, and Liberty. And then that rounded everything out to be me going to the WNBA.
Like you said, like when something is for you, it's for you, and you're going to end up exactly where.
Falls right there in line.
So you're at Madison Square Garden, and then how did you make that transition into sports?
So I've always loved women's basketball. My best friend Lakivia Boykin, she played basketball at Wake, and then her teammate De'Erica made it to the league. And like I grew up with a lot of excellent basketball players, so most of them ended up in the WNBA. And so I had all these connections. I always loved the WNBA and women's basketball in general. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, where there's a huge legacy of women's basketball there because of Kay Yow, NC State women's basketball head coach. She died of cancer. But yeah, so when I was cheering in the WNBA season, I would notice that there was no media. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. These are like Olympians. These are the top 144 athletes in the world. Why is nobody covering them? And my DJ friend, Tiffany, she was like, why don't you talk to them? So I did. I went to their away team hotel room at the Renaissance. It was right by MSG. And I would set my phone up and I would just record interviews and post them online. And that's when I started gaining traction and following sports related as opposed to modeling. I already had a strong following because of modeling, but adding the sports, it's a completely different audience. So it was just dope to see my worlds collide. And, you know, how the players took to me, I felt like that was just very natural. I saw the humanity in them and was telling their stories in a way that wasn't being told at the time. Because, I mean, honestly, if you want to keep it a buck back then, there were only like 5 of us covering the league in general, like truly covering it. So I just knew I was onto something. And then I realized how underserved they were and how, like, even the people I didn't know, their stories deserved to be told too. So I kept it up. And then I started writing for High Post Hoops to get my credibility up. And then Bleacher Report actually found me online and offered me a job.
That's the dream story right there. So
it was hard work.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So when Bleacher Report like discovered you, what were you thinking?
My friend Meredith Minkow, she works in the San Francisco office. I think she led them to me. But they wanted to create a women's platform. So they wanted to get somebody who was truly in the midst of women's sports and was speaking on behalf of it already. And so that's how they found me. That's how we aligned. And they said, we're not going to tell you what to do with this. Here's this platform. Do what you want. We trust your voice. And they let me make it mine. And because of Bleacher, I've been able to cover other sports and really realize that not only is the WNBA underserved, but there's a plethora of women's sports that need their stories told. And even beyond sports, women in the music industry, they need their stories told. So just to shine a light on dope women, no matter what space they're in, as long as it's in culture or sports, that's what my calling ended up being. And that's where I am right now.
Why do you think that so often women's sports stories aren't told?
Misogyny and lack of interest in general women's sports. I think that people need to realize that women occupy these spaces and adjust accordingly. We shouldn't be talking about this in 2020, like why people are uncomfortable with women playing sports and not just being in the house. But women's sports are a lot newer than the men's sports, except for like, everybody's always strangely appreciated gymnastics. So that like automatically does numbers, right? But like just being able to stomach the WNBA, which is predominantly Black and predominantly queer, and be able to stomach that and then know that they're excellent at what they do, that's a lot for people. The women's soccer team gets a lot more love than a lot of other leagues, but they still have a long way to go. They're on paper better than the men's team. It's like
Definitely
not up for argument, and they're still struggling. So their side too. But yeah, I just think that people need to realize that women are present, women of color are present, the LGBT community is present, and there's no type of ignoring or just trying to deny people of their spaces that they're supposed to be in will ever be able to be sustainable. It just isn't.
I think in today's day and age, we talk a lot about being an ally to people who are different than you. So what is the best way people can be an ally in these situations?
If you do want to be an ally for women's sports, buy the tickets, figure out a way to go to the games, buy merch, use your dollar, because that really goes a long way. Or even raise awareness online, like social media, talk about it. I know talking about things generates income. So it's just all about a money thing, honestly, with women's sports.
I did want to ask you about the impact of Kobe Bryant.
So he's always been present, especially in his years after retirement. And it was just very altruistic. And he just wanted to provide. Gigi had, vocalized that she wanted to play basketball. So I think the WNBA was a great example of her to like look forward to, like, this is where you can be. And so he opened that door for her to see what she could become. So he was very present, very supportive. Nobody asked him to be there. Nobody asked him to rock the merch. Nobody asked him to be vocal about it. And so I just think that he touched a lot of lives, especially, you see the players like Jewel Lloyd, Sabrina Ionescu, UConn women's basketball, like you physically see his impact, and players study him. And I just think that it's just mortifying that we don't have him here anymore. But the impact that he left, I hope that people can see his appreciation and love for women and women's basketball, and being a dad, and just appreciation for the female, masses, and I hope they can translate that into their action. That's the definition of being an ally: be present, be active, be vocal, just being there.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely very missed. So back to you and all the wonderful things that you're doing. So can you tell us about this Highlight Her?
Basically, Highlight Her is just a platform that showcases women in the sports and culture world and them doing dope things. So whether that's highlights, whether that's chatter sessions, which is like our panel, or that's, quotes that they say in the community, how they act in the community, fun, cute moments. It's just celebrating being a woman in the sports and cultural realm. It's oftentimes celebratory. Right now, we are focusing on Black Lives Matter, and that's very intentional because I am the voice of it, and I would be doing it a disservice if I didn't address that. But yeah, it's just a matter of women just occupying those spaces that we're just great at, and keep amplifying their voices and keep showcasing them.
Definitely. I interned at Bleacher Report in 2000. Yes, I had the most amazing time ever. It was awesome. I did a story. I was on the social stories team, and I did a story about a gymnast who, Angel Rice. She also.
Oh, I love Angel. I was a cheerleader, amazing. So obviously I know.
Yes,
Angel.
Me too. Me too. And she was like everything. And when the video came out, I did what you're not supposed to do, and I looked in the comments, and it was like a terrible place. And I was just like mortified. So what advice do you have for people who are making content that is often unappreciated?
You're doing it because you're passionate about it and you're trying to send a message. And trust me, that message is going to be sent whether or not there's toxicity around it and people trying to pull it down. So just know why you're creating and what you want to achieve with that. The trolls are going to be there, obviously. But, you know, especially in your particular situation, when you made it about Angel Rice, she is undeniably an excellent tumbler. Like, there's like nothing that anybody can take away from her tumbling skills. She's literally a world champion in power tumbling and cheerleading. Like, what can you possibly say that's negative about it? Like, what can you say? So just knowing that you picked, you know, a woman that's powerful, has made an impact. Obviously, you're talking to me about her and I know who she is. And like, there are people out there who didn't know who she was and then looked at her because of your story. So the content creators that are there, you can read the comments. You can read the comments all you want, but that's their ignorance. That's not anything reflection on you. How they feel about your content has nothing to do with you. Nothing. If you know you did it in a great way, if you know you did the right thing, it's just all about integrity.
So in your career, who have been some of your favorite people that you've been able to interview?
Oh, to interview? Well, let me think. The one that's not a woman was Snoop Dogg. I know he's in hot water for some things right now. But he's such a women's basketball fan that you wouldn't believe. Like, he was schooling me on Cheryl Miller. And I was like, okay, girl, like, go off, Snoop. He was great. I loved Rhapsody. Rhapsody was really super dope. She went to NC State too, so that's like my sister in them. But she has such a deep perspective on, you know, being a Black woman, on sharing her talents with the world. That was great. I always love talking to my friends in the W, whether that be like Candace Parker. She's always fun. I don't know if you saw that segment with us, but that was really fun for me. And then Skylar Diggins Smith, she gave she dropped some dimes in our air, some gems in her interview. But I just like interviews that are spoken from the heart, and I think that that's what impacts it most. So like, I wouldn't say that I have a favorite one or a least favorite one, but I get something different out of a lot of people. So each of them just contributes a little bit more to my joy. But yeah, I would definitely say Snoop is high up there just because he showed that, like, yeah, you can come into the office crip walking with a boombox, but you can also sit down and talk about the Sparks and Cheryl Miller and what could have been with her. And just seeing, you know, people respond to, you know, Natasha Cloud was a good one that just happened. Seeing the response of that, and people are like, I needed this for my life. I needed this as a tool to navigate the times right now. I think that's really dope. Just for her to be like, hey, I'm a Black woman in America that's suffering right now. Here's how you can be my ally. Here's how I find joy. I'm bisexual and biracial. So here's this gray area that people a lot of times steer away from. Again, we were able to talk openly about that because I'm not afraid to touch on topics that other people are more touchy about. Like, I don't understand how that's like a touchy thing if it's your identity. So I think it's really, really dope to see how comfortable she was sharing her story, especially on live with everybody like that. But that was, I forgot that just happened. So that was super, super impactful one for me.
What do you think is next for you? What do you have like up your sleeve?
So I'm in what I love. So there's no like beyond it. It's literally women's sports is where I want to be. And it's very intentional and very like, that is what it is. I've had plenty of opportunities to do a sideline for NBA, for men, anything. I don't want that. I had to deal with all them games of the Knicks when I was cheering. I don't need that no more.
And what do you want your legacy to be? Like, when you're done with your career, it's so far down the line, but I love to ask this question because, you know, what do you think is most important, that when people hear you and they look at what you've done, what do you want them to take away?
I want them to know that I did everything authentically me, and I want them to be inspired to do everything authentically them. I want them to look at me and say, this is somebody who, you know, did what she wanted, how she wanted, and brought people along with her. I want them to be able to look to their left and their right, and they see other people of color, other women, other Black women right next to them.
Thank you for being you Thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. This was awesome.
Well, keep grinding. Like, I mean, you just graduated, right?
Yes.
You just graduated. You've already had an internship at, the #1 sports company.
Yes.
The future is yours. And I would say don't even wait for anything. Just keep going and keep posting your personal content, and somebody's going to